Okay, hey, thanks for watching. So in this video, we're going to continue our series talking about OpenAI Assistants. And if you've been following along, we've gone through a couple different iterations of this. And in this particular example, I'm going to be covering how to utilize the code interpreter within an assistant to be able to analyze data as well as generate files, and in this case, images as well. So this is kind of the image we're going to create based on a Microsoft stock price. That'll be the scenario we're walking through. And let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here I have my notebook. And again, we have been using the same picture a couple times. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've already walked through this. So if you haven't watched my earlier videos, definitely want to go ahead and do that. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to focus on how we'd use this code interpreter, which is one of the built-in tools that you have with your OpenAI assistant. So we're going to use that. And what the code interpreter allows us to do is be able to generate scripts, Python scripts. So it's actually running in a sandbox environment, a Python script that will actually generate the script and run it. So there are some limitations. You don't have access to absolutely everything, but you do have access to the basic libraries. So that'll help us get started. Okay, so essentially we're going to follow the same approach. We're going to create our assistant. We are going to tell it we want to use the code interpreter. We're going to give it our model, and we're going to upload a sample file that we wanted to analyze. We're then going to ask it some questions, and we're going to see if it can generate a candlestick chart for us based on the data that it sees. All right, so first thing is to go ahead and install the requirements. So again, same as before, we're going to open up OpenAI, tick token, Cohere. Those are all kind of required. So you're going to go ahead and install those. We're going to have a couple imports. Okay, so we're going to import the OpenAI library from here. We're also going to be using the Yahoo Finance package. All right. So first things first, you have to create your keys. So again, make sure you go get your keys. Go ahead and do that. Get your keys, and then also you're going to want to go ahead and create your OpenAI client based on those keys. I've already done some of these steps, so I'm just kind of walking through these real quick. So here what we're going to do is we're going to go out and have the Yahoo Finance grab the Microsoft history for 1 year and save it to a CSV file. So if we go ahead and show the files and run this, it'll download that data and save it off to a CSV. If I refresh, there is my Microsoft stock data CSV file. All right, so we're going to then take that data, and we first need to upload that to OpenAI. So again, there are some limitations. File size, 512 megabytes, total max storage of 100 gigabytes. Same limitations here, but for our purposes, this will work fine. So we're going to go ahead and grab that CSV file. We're going to upload it, and that's going to give us back a list of files or a specific file. So every file you upload will be given a unique file ID. Okay, that's the most important thing when you're trying to use these APIs, is you need to get the ID of whatever object is that you created, whether it's an assistant, whether it's a file, whether it's a thread, message. All of them have a similar style. Everything is keyed off of an ID string that you will then need to have. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my files here. So this is the file ID for that specific CSV file that I uploaded. And if you went over here to your assistants, and you'd actually see them here. So I'll just kind of show you under files. We should see my Microsoft stock data CSV file here. Okay, so that's all present. And actually, real quick, I just kind of show you what it looks like. So you see, it's actually just a tabular data that has a lot of data for the past year, open, high, close, volume, and so forth. So you can use this data, and we can use things like pandas and matplotlib to analyze this data within the code interpreter. All right, so we have the file up there now. We're going to go ahead and create our assistant. So the assistant we're going to create is going to be called the stock chart maker. And the idea here is it's going to generate graphs from CSV files containing stock price history. It helps users upload their data, analyze it, and create accurate charts while focusing on data accuracy and clear instructions. All right, so these are the instructions for how the assistant's going to work. And I'll just mention a couple real caveats here with this. As I mentioned, you don't have access to everything, right? It is a sandbox environment. So you have to use just the libraries that are available to you within that sandbox. But for our purposes, we have what we need. We need the matplotlib library to be able to create our graph for us, and we have other libraries that are necessary. If you don't have those libraries, then you'll get a message back. Like the assistant's going to tell you, hey, I can't do whatever it is you're trying to do because it doesn't have access to everything. In those cases, you would probably have to fall back to using a function approach, which was one of the other videos that I covered earlier. So go back and watch the video on functions if you want to go that route, right? So again, you are limited to what you can do, but if you're falling within that, then everything will work great this way. All right, one thing we have to do is we have to tell our assistant that we want to use the code interpreter. So we're going to make sure that we have that as our tool type. Okay, so you're going to want to use that as your type of tool, as opposed to having something like function or retrieval, or the other types of tools. And we're also going to give it our model, and we're going to give it the file ID that we want to have associated with this particular assistant. We're going to go ahead and create that. All right, there's our assistant ID. Okay, again, same pattern, has a unique string ID for that assistant. All right, we can always go back and click on our list of assistants, and there it is. There's the one I just created. I can go ahead and click on and get the details. You'll see I have code interpreter turned on now, and my one file is associated with this particular assistant. Okay. Once we have that, let's go ahead and retrieve it just so we can make sure we get the data back. So if you want to get your list of assistants you have created, you can use under the assistants resource, you can get the list function and get back all the assistants. I only have that one assistant. That's our unique ID from that. Now, as I mentioned, everything you do within these assistants is done through a conversation. So a thread is synonymous with a conversation. So we need to create a new conversation. All right, so the way we do that is by using the threads resource, calling the create function. That'll give us a new thread ID. All right, so that's a unique thread. Right now it's an empty thread. And let me just kind of jump back up here and kind of show you. So what we've done here is we've created this thread. There's nothing in here now. We need to put our messages in here. And this is also where the AI messages are going to come back from. So we're going to have our user messages for questions we want to ask. And coming back are going to be the AI responses to those messages. All right, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our question to the thread. So messages is how we communicate our questions to and from the Assistant API. And the messages go inside of a thread. So we're going to be using the threads resource, and within there we're going to access the messages resource and the create function. And we're going to make sure that we give it the thread ID that we created. So this is going to be the ID of that thread that we did up here. So that's going to be that ID. And we're going to say this is going to be a user message. And we're asking it to generate a candlestick graph for Microsoft, and also provide a link to download the image, but we also want to download the script. Okay, so this is going to generate the actual image itself, and then the script that it created based on whatever we asked it to do. All right, so let's go ahead and add that message in. All right, now we have the message ready to go. We then need to run the assistant. So we're going to call run, and we're going to get back a run ID. All right, so that's off in the background asynchronously running for some period of time. And this is where you will need to check the statuses of the run. Remember, it happens. It'll take a while for the OpenAI application or services to generate what it needs. So while it's doing that, we want to loop and make sure we know when it's done. So in progress means it's still working. All right, so while this is still working, you can go off and kind of wait. You have to kind of continuously prompt and check for it to see when it's done. We'll know when it's done when we get either a completed message or a failed message. It's not uncommon at this point to have it be failed. Again, this is also important to point out, this is still beta. So as you're writing these first versions of this, just be aware that it is beta. There are going to be some times where it may not work correctly the first time. You may need to run it again, which is something I've had to do with that. So we'll go ahead and let that run. All right. Now we've gone through that. It took a while, right? So I had this running every 10 seconds. So it took over a minute for that to complete. And finally we get our message letting us know that the assistant has completed whatever it is we asked it to do. Now, in order to kind of see what happened, and we need to go back and retrieve those messages from the thread. So we're going to use that same thread ID, right? And then we're going to call the threads module. and we're going to go into the messages within there. Sorry, this is threads resource, and get the messages resource and list out all the messages in there. And if you iterate through this, you'll see that we've got a lot of data here. And I'm just going to kind of scroll to the right and kind of see there's a lot here. But it's kind of, there's a lot of data. Some of it's going to be textual, but you also may have a message telling you, like in this case, we actually got to generate an image. All right. So all of this is documented within their API documentation. So it's important to kind of walk through that. So here I am on the documentation page for assistants, and this is where you'll get a lot of good details about the different objects we talked about, how we create the assistants. We'll talk about specifically today about the message threads and managing message threads and messages. This is where you're going to have to be able to iterate through all of that data. Okay, I'll walk through this. So there's quite a bit there. You've got the life cycle for the statuses. So definitely want to read through this to make sense of how the data is sent back to you. Okay. The most important thing right now is that you need to be able to iterate through all of the code or all the messages that came back. And in my case, what I did is I created a loop here, and I'll share this as well with you so you have access. But I'm iterating through all the messages, and I'm going to go ahead and print out all the messages along with any annotation. All messages will come back through, and they'll have either, if it's something that has an annotation or a file with it, it comes through as the annotation. So you have to iterate through there and check and see if all your messages, if there's an annotation associated to it, then you can iterate through those annotations and pull out the information. What we're doing here is when we get an annotation, we have to get the file ID because that's going to give us the actual file itself that we're trying to retrieve. Okay, so annotations will point to files. You have to then go retrieve those files. All right, so that's what I'm doing here is I am asking the client to go get the contents of one of the files within the annotation, and then I'm simply saving that off as a file. So if I run this, you'll see that once it comes through, if I refresh, you'll see I have two files here. I've got my image. So if I double click on that, there is my image, candlestick image that came through. So that looks pretty good. And then I also had asked it for the script, and I also got the context of the script itself, so you can kind of see all the details. So you can definitely take this script now that you've generated and make it your own. You can then do this on your own if you wanted to, or if you just wanted to see what was the thought process that was used by the code interpreter when it went through and built that chart. All right. So it can also, if you want, these are all back. This is also all of the data. So you can kind of see here's the steps that I went through. Now, it took a while, right? I asked it a question, but the assistant, as it was going through, you'll kind of see the thoughts. For example, it's kind of telling you what it's doing. It's looking at the CSV file, it's trying to read it, trying to process it, it looks at the data. And as it goes through, it's going to hopefully fix itself. If it realizes something didn't work the first time it went through, it'll try to correct it. And then eventually it'll try to get you to the end result if it can't. If it can't, you're going to get a message of completed, and it'll just tell you that for whatever reason it didn't work. In those cases, you probably can fix that by either updating the data perhaps or giving better instructions. Those are kind of things you can do to improve the response that you get back from the code interpreter. All right. But you'll see there's a lot of different steps that were here. There's the original message, there's all of the different steps that it did. And then here is the last one where it pointed at a file. And then I grabbed the chart, and then I also grabbed the script right here. So essentially that's what was done, and that's how you do it. So now you have the ability to call it code interpreter. You can then grab the scripts and the images that you want. By the way, once you're done, you want to go ahead and make sure that you clean everything up. So I'm going to clean up both of those, delete your assistant, and delete your files. All right. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if there's additional topics you'd like to cover. I'll be happy to try to entertain those in the future. Thanks for watching.